And we're
All
live.
right. Welcome to the Marketing Trench. So, we're starting a little bit late today because I had to go grab a pen and paper because today we're going to be talking about the best tech stack to use right now. And so, get ready because we're going to tell you exactly the tools that you need, regardless of your situation. It doesn't matter what you're doing, these tools are going to do all the work for you. And when you're done, you write all this down and you sign up for all of these programs to which we have no affiliates, I promise. And trust me, you're going to convert so many sales. You're just going to get to sit back, pour money into a machine. It's going to do all the talking for you. It's going to do all the converting. All you need to do is collect a commission check at the other end from an escrow company like mine. That's what we're doing today on the Marketing Trench. No, it's absolutely not. But this is the question we get all the time, right? Whether
Yeah.
it's Ricardo, whether it's Scott here, helping lenders to do their technology stack. I don't really get the question a whole lot because nobody wants to talk to escrow. But I know that these two guys get the question. And
It's
let's just start with the question. Where do we begin with a question like this?
well, so tech stack is more a more maybe evolved way to ask this question. The question is usually what's the best CRM, right? Or what's the best tool for this? And it is probably the most common question in all of these industry support groups, especially that have anything to do with tech, with marketing or technology, or anything like that. And so, yeah, so last night I was tagged in a post in a very popular group, with a lot of people in it, and the question was literally, what is the best tech stack right now? And I was tagged in it. It was like, hey, what's your input? And initially I was just like, after I removed my palm from my forehead, I was, and it was almost needed to be surgically removed. I hit it too hard. And then I started thinking about this and I was like, it's not it's the question that's the reason the answer is so elusive is because the question is wrong.
Yeah.
Right. And we talk about this a lot, and especially you, you have this fantastic process of identifying your brand, identifying your messaging, and that kind of thing. And so I thought about it, and my answer essentially was that I think this is the wrong question because your tech stack is a set of tools that helps to facilitate and automate and create efficiencies in your processes and systems. So the step back from that question is, how do you want to run your business? What is the goal of your business? What are you trying to accomplish efficiencies
All right.
in?
All right. Hold on. I'm going to stop you because the goal of my
Okay.
business is to make money. So how is that a real question? Like, I want to
Yeah.
sell homes.
No.
I want to close
It
loans.
it is. So how do you want your consumer to communicate with you?
I don't care. Email, text, whatever gets me a check.
So in the mortgage industry, and I would say this is almost with any other industry as well. To me, I kind of see it as three real pieces of this. The first piece is the exposure and engagement piece. So how do you get out in front of people? How do you make it easy for your consumer to engage with you? Then you typically have in the mortgage industry, it's a loan application, right? That's the first step after you've earned their trust. So how do you give them access to that loan application? What's the consumer experience? And then the third part of that is that CRM. And that's where you're communicating along the entire process and creating this consumer experience. So those three technology pieces facilitate that consumer journey from discovery to engagement, to conversion, to repeat and referral business. And that's what the tech stack can do for you. But you need that pencil and paper to map out what that process looks like. What customer experience do I want to manufacture so that I can make more money? And the reason why tech stacks are important to make money is because that's your efficiencies, and your tech stacks and your systems ensure a consistent experience every single time, not only for the consumer, but for your employees that are expected to operate within that system.
Okay.
No, you're not buying it?
Well, I mean, at a high level, it sounds like a nice idea, but I'm over here. I'm trying, like somebody who's asking you this question on Facebook, if they're tagging you, they've got money in their pocket. They want to spend it on the thing that works. Everyone says that they got the same, more or less the same tool set, but like some unique advantage. Where do I start, Scott? Like, where do I start?
That's actually a really good follow-up question, and I'm going to challenge. I'm going to challenge the motivation of the answerer of or the asker of this question, and I don't know what their motivation was, but
Play devil's advocate. I'll be the guy asking the question.
I believe that a lot of times we're trying to solve problems in our systems. And we think that a better tool will solve the problem because that's how you started off the episode. How you started off the episode is exactly what every single tech company will tell you that their tool does. And to me, that's kind of like saying, well, I want to build a house, so what's the best hammer to use? And it just feels like such an incomplete. It feels like that's such an incomplete question. So,
but hold on. But
I rabbit hole. There was a second part of your question.
I mean, so you said building the house. What's the best hammer to use? And the thing that jumps out about me is that's an interesting observation, except for the fact that a hammer is not a relevant tool in house building, like on the scale of the project of house building. But a CRM is much bigger than the hammer on the scale of house building, right? The CRM is like, how do I lay the foundation of the house? And so it matters, right?
So here's the answer that I gave. So I thought about it and I tried to be as succinct as I could, and I tried to express this thing and I tried to tie it all in together. And so what I suggested for this particular person was to modify the question a little bit and ask who is super excited about their tech stack and feels like they've nailed it, right? And then then everybody that engages with that, set up a Zoom call and find out what their business model is. Find out what their processes are, find out what their systems, find out what problems they were trying to solve that led them to that tech. Because what ultimately happened is this was posted last night, there's 44 comments on it. 39 of those comments are a list of tools. They're a list, I'm using this brand, I'm using this brand, I'm using this brand. And the reality is all of those answers are right? Those tools accomplish these things, and so there isn't a wrong answer, and there is no one tool set. So my recommendation was, hey, get to know people who run their business the way you want to run your business, and then have a conversation with them about which tools they chose and why. Right. And then they added into that, the obvious things, because Zapier came up a couple of times, and I pulled that into my answer. And I just said, I'm glad that this is involved in the conversation, because data portability and having that seamless moving that data from one tech platform to another, and while they're in different stages of the sales process, is super, super important. It eliminates redundancy. It eliminates human error of an employee having to enter information into some place, and you can kind of keep their intent through the entire thing. Yeah. So that's really what it is. I mean, and I say this as a serial shiny object chaser myself. Right. So we've Josh and I at Bywise Mortgage have tried so many CRMs, so many point of sale services. We kind of really left the loan origination piece. We're using antiquated technology from the 90s, but it works and it performs its function. And so we're trying to bolt things onto it so that the data can move through. But like all of those things, so we've tried a lot of them, and what it always ended up coming down to is, yes, every tool will do this, this, and this, But then, well, here's what we learned. What we learned is almost all of these technologies built their technology around their perception of the process that it's involved in. So we find a lot of CRMs and a lot of these technologies say, this is how you should run your business in this area of that business. So you want people to fill out an application? Here's how you should engage with the consumer. This is how it should be tracked. This is who should get notifications of what and when. And it should all be through our platform. And so they they have their core competency, and then they have this orbit of all these other bells and whistles that they think people would want or should use. But it really requires that you run your business that way. It requires that is your sales flow in order for that tool to fit snugly into its place. So you end up using parts and pieces of different tools to accomplish one flow or one experience.
Yeah, I had a conversation with Ricardo last night. I actually called him and I said, "Hey man, I want to send out a really beautiful templated email. It would include video, and I wanted to have a high design sensibility. What tool do you recommend?" And he recommended a CRM. I can't remember which one it was. And I said, but I don't want to send like 1,000 of them at once. I want to send one. Like, I just want to be able, someone sends us new business. I want to be able to fire off one email to that person and have it look amazing. So he recommended another like quasi CRM that integrates as a plugin into Gmail. And I said, well, I really want something that I could almost just fire out of Outlook. Like, we're already in Outlook. I want to be able to, and then he starts kvetching at me. He's like, "Oh, you don't want to use Outlook. Outlook's the worst. What are you trying to do?" But I feel like that's kind of the process you have to go down, right? Because for Ricardo, he and Will and some other people, they would use tools like ConvertKit. That was one of the tools that Ricardo recommended to me, right? Use ConvertKit. I thought, well, I've used ConvertKit, and there's like, you have to do like 10 steps for what I feel like should just be a one-step thing, because ConvertKit's designed to do a whole bunch of automated flows, and that's not what I'm after. I'm just like, I'm after a one-touch experience in this instance.
Yeah.
And so to your point, Scott, like, asking people why they love the tools they love and what problems those tools are solving is key. And there's not necessarily a right answer, right? Like, to give another example, when Ricardo was talking to you and I about what microphones to use, because he had that terrible one that he had for a long time that was echoey, and every time he touched his boom arm, it sounded like we were in the middle of a tornado or something. So he reached out, and he said, "Hey, what mic should I use?" And I sent him, 3 or 4, and they were all, great mics, right? They were from Shure and Audio Technica and Rode, right? So these are top brands. And what I encouraged him to do was I said, don't look at the specs. Go listen to YouTubers do reviews of the mics, because they'll use the mics on their YouTube video. And then I said, just listen for what you want your voice to sound like. Yeah. So in the case of the mic that I'm using right now, the Audio Technica, I chose it because I felt like it had richer middle and bass tones. And I feel like my voice needs those specific ranges amplified. And so I chose it, but there's no reason you can't choose a Shure mic. That's what Joe Rogan uses, right? Do you want to be Joe Rogan? Then I guess use the Shure mic, right? There are other mics that talk radio hosts. I can't remember the name of. There's like an industry standard mic that talk radio shows use. It's the one that Rush Limbaugh made famous by having it plated gold and calling it as gold. But it's all the same mic, and there's a sound. There's like a certain sound to it, right? And so with you. If you're asking these kinds of questions, to Scott's point, it's like, how do you want to sound, right? How do you want to look? What is that workflow? It's really interesting to me, Scott, that you said that you guys kind of have as a baseline some antiquated technology because it works, right? And it's like, that surprises me, because I think of you as somebody who's so on the front edge of all this stuff that I would think, oh man, he's always using the latest thing. And if I want to be like Scott, I got to use the latest thing. But no, that's not what you're saying.
I rarely use the latest thing. because and this is something I've probably learned over time, but tools don't solve problems. Solutions solve problems, and tools facilitate the solution. So sometimes it takes a while to reach the limitations of what a tool will do. And then I realize, wow, this tool won't allow me to do this one thing. And it seems like this one thing is important enough that I should seek out a new solution for it. But it's challenging because it's a tech stack. It's like a Jenga game. Like if you remove one tech piece, and then it's not a Jenga game because you're putting things back in, but every time you remove a tech piece, you're not jeopardizing, but you're compromising the stability of that system that you had in place. So when you move new tech pieces in and out, it changes the way that technology interacts or communicates with all of the other pieces. And it's really not that complicated. But then again, all these technologies, they all pretty much have the same core competency. Like, yes, they are a CRM. Yes, you can store data in it. Yes, you can tag data in it. Sometimes you can do email marketing or text marketing or video marketing out of a CRM. If not, you have to connect the CRM to an external piece to do that. So again, it all comes down to what are you trying to accomplish? And then once you identify that, then there's all of these tools that are available. But honestly, again, the best part is to find somebody who's running their business in a way that you would want to run your business, and then ask them what tools they're using. And then around that, you're going to find a lot. But I mean, what I found is most people aren't using the latest and greatest. Mm-hmm. They're using something that they found several years ago until it doesn't work any longer.
Right. Okay, so I want to propose, I love this idea of choose tools that solve problems that you have. Let me propose another maybe way of qualifying a tool or selecting a tool, and I want to get your take on it, okay?
Yep.
Okay, so I think you should use a tool that excites you, especially one that aligns with your values. So let me give an example. I had coffee yesterday with a good friend of mine, and she really cares about sustainability. She works for this big multinational recruiting staffing agency, and they've been growing like crazy. They've been growing like a weed. They got all of these young professionals out there in the world helping companies like mine. This is how we first met, helping companies like mine staff our businesses, okay? And what do? They all go out and they have their notebooks and they're taking notes all the time and flip, and they burn through these notebooks that are branded with their company brand. And then when they're done, they get rid of the notebooks and they go on the next notebook. And she looked at that practice and she said, okay, notebooks work, but I really hate the fact that we are using all this paper. It has a negative impact on our environment, and I really care about sustainability. So what can we do as an alternative? So she actually got branded Rocket Books. And if you're not familiar with Rocket Books, you write in them almost like with a dry erase style pen. And then you use an app that Rocket Books provides where you more or less OCR all the text on your Rocket Book into some sort of digital database, OneNote or something like that. And you can do little tricks that basically tell Rocket Books where to take this OCR image and put it, right? So if you like circle a little icon at the bottom of the page, it'll put it in one notebook. But if you circle a different icon, it puts it in a different notebook. And so there's, these little gimmicks to it. But the bottom line is you're never using paper. You're always using digital tools. What I found, however, in her case was she wasn't a huge fan of the scanning portion of the app. She felt like, yeah, it's okay, but there are a lot of reasons it doesn't work for me. And so what I end up doing is I take these notes I've taken and I just set my notebook next to me and I transcribe the notes that I have on my notebook into OneNote. So she's not even fully utilizing the tool. In fact, I would argue she's duplicating work, and she could do the same thing with a paper notebook except for the fact that she's trying to eliminate paper. So for her, she's going to use Rocketbook, even though she's not using it to its fullest, because she's inspired by the idea of having a more sustainable method to a fundamental part of her business. And that's why she's chosen that tool. So, Scott, I wonder, you've used a lot of tools. Have you ever used a tool because it excited you and inspired you to work, and had that be a primary reason for choosing that tool?
Wow, that's a really good question. I mean, probably the most important decision and tool that I got excited about was WordPress in 2007.
Okay, so
And
how did it inspire you?
because I'm not a technology, I'm not a, I guess today I'm considered a tech savvy person, but I don't code. I don't have any experience or background in it. And so things need to be relatively intuitive. And, I don't know how to build websites and do that. And it was a simple way to publish content. And my goal was to be found on Google because consumers don't want to talk to a mortgage salesperson after the crash of 2008. So it's like it all started kind of coming in at the end of 2007. A lot of us saw it coming a lot sooner than that. And so we were kind of preparing for this. We need an alternative way to communicate with consumers because our entire industry is tainted, right? So we need an opportunity for consumers to go out and find answers on their own and earn their trust, and then start the conversation. So that was WordPress, but WordPress was not easy 13 years ago. It was a lot more difficult. The technology wasn't as easy to use as it is now.
There weren't templates, there weren't plugins like there are now.
There were some plugins.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Saying there weren't any is too far. There were very few.
Right. And it was, yeah, definitely. But like now everything is this drag and drop visual canvas that you can use. But back then it wasn't. Right. And if you wanted your, and it was really all written in HTML, but what was unique about WordPress is you had the text tab so you could see how it looked. But if you wanted any formatting, that was HTML coding. So I actually took a class from a community college to learn HTML so that I could just figure out just enough so that I could fix the mistakes that I made, because I'm really good at breaking stuff.
But in comparison to a GeoCities or a Blogger, which were kind of your alternatives at that point in time, the WordPress sites felt more professional just right out the gate.
Well, you have more control over the experience and you owned the platform. Yeah. So WordPress is a what do they call it? Creative Commons, use. It's free. People can use it and you really can control the environment. Whereas a lot of those other platforms, like I don't think Google's blogging platform even still exists, does it?
I don't think so.
Blogspot or something. I don't remember what it was.
What it is.
But yeah. But that again, that goes into what was my goal. And my goal was to be able to publish this stuff and control the consumer experience. I didn't necessarily want to piggyback it into an environment where there was a lot of distractions. So my customer journey, the experience that I wanted to give influenced my decision on what tools to use, because it would have been way easier. So I really started writing on ActiveRain. So, and that was such a horrible experience that I wanted to control the conversation. Because it was just it was a weird environment. It was consumers coming to ask questions, but then professionals dogpiling on all the other professionals answering the questions, saying that they were answering the questions wrong. And it was a weird experience. And I was like, okay, how do you give consumers access to expertise without confusing them with all this other garbage? And so that all of those problems that I was trying to solve influenced my decision.
So let me do a callback to our episode a few weeks ago with Kyle Seagraves, called "Cracking the Consumer Direct Code." Kyle does YouTube videos. He's done a lot of them. He just sits down and he publishes them. And he started out with his phone in his hand, walking around, blah, blah, blah. Here's what an FHA loan is. Here are the guidelines. And then he's kind of scaled up from there. All right. So if you listen to that episode and you think to yourself, I want to do that, right? I think it matters that you have at least a couple of tools that make it easy for you to do that. So one of the biggest challenges that we identified in that episode, and we've identified in so many other episodes, is the internal motivation to sit down and do stuff, right? So Scott wanted to answer questions related to mortgages, and then he hated his experience on Active Rain, and WordPress gave him, like, he had the internal motivation, and WordPress removed whatever barriers Active Rain had to him being able just to pour content into the universe, right? Mm-hmm. And so you want to make sure that if you have that internal motivation to make content, you aren't having to use that motivation to overcome some piece of technology, right? And in fact, not only do you want to reduce the friction, but also you want to multiply your effort. So for me, working on an Apple device still to this day is more inspiring than working on a Windows device. And I don't necessarily know why, just something about the whole experience makes me want to work harder. Or Figma. Like, I feel like Figma, I do a lot of mock-ups, design work, and I am a C designer. Like, I would give my work a C. And I aspire to be an A designer. And when I don't do A design work, I hate myself, and it demotivates me, right? I'm just this moment of honesty with you all. So, but that demotivation matters because it means that I'm not advancing on my project. Okay, so Figma has a whole bunch of plugins and libraries that solve all these little problems that I feel like keep me from being an A designer, such as spacing, such as replication of component work, such as being able to make have a nice portrait picture in a mock-up, right? Just like little things that make a really good mock-up pop. Figma has built into it and makes it really easy for you to have pretty seamless workflow. So you're not having to solve these like quirky little problems with how you're doing layers and masks. Instead, you're just kind of focused as best as you can on your vision and getting it on the screen, right? And so I would argue that for me, Figma is an enabling tool and therefore a good one for my tech stack. But if you're like a really, really high-end designer and you're really talented, Figma's fine, but like an Adobe Illustrator is just higher power because it does a different thing for a different tier of person, right?
And I would go the other direction with that because I had this experience, and you're definitely not a C designer. I think I'm closer to a C. You're definitely a mid to high B. But Canva solved that graphic design work for thumbnails and featured images and things like that I just Photoshop wouldn't click with me, and it was just too complex. And so I needed something. I knew what I liked when I saw it, but I didn't know how to do it. And that's what I loved about Canva. You know, that's another one of those great, when you talk about, so that's another thing about that question is what tech stack are you using? Well, for what? Right? So you have a tech stack for almost every process or every step in your process. And it's like, they all kind of have to communicate with each other, and they all kind of do, their own little thing to do the heavy lifting. So it's an absolutely valid question. It gets asked all the time. And I just thought it was important to unpack it and rephrase the question because I think it's the wrong question. And I think that's the biggest challenge that we have as entrepreneurs and business owners. And that's the biggest advantage that vendors have, is that they know we're not asking the right questions.
Yeah.
right? So what ends up happening, and we had this conversation on a previous episode, is a lot of these vendors are selling solutions to problems that you don't know you have yet, right? So they're like, you're not doing this in your business because you don't have this tool. So use this tool so you can start doing this in your business. But in reality, you need to take a step back and say, okay, do I want to do that in my business? And where does that fit into my workflow? Who's going to be responsible for it? How is it going to be delivered? And yeah, and that was kind of the whole reason why we even started this podcast, Dustin, is because there are all these marketing gurus and people out there that are telling people, oh yeah, you just have to do this, or here's a push button system and all this kind of stuff. And then, you, me, and Ricardo always felt like the He-Man haters club. And we were just like, this stuff is all just BS. I don't understand why people would buy this. This is the biggest pile of garbage I've ever seen. And then we would unpack that stuff. And, if the company exists, it's a good solution for enough people that the company exists. It doesn't mean it's the solution.
Yeah. Well, and your introduction of Canva into this conversation is so perfect, Scott, because for me, Canva is too restrictive. It doesn't give me enough. But for you, like you're coming in with, and by the way, I use Canva for some things. Like I use Canva. I wouldn't use Canva for a web design. I absolutely would use Canva, and I have used Canva for a PowerPoint presentation, because I don't want all the freedom that a Figma gives me for PowerPoint. That's too much. I want more templates to start with. But for a web design, I don't. Like I want to have more freedom. I know what I'm going for. I know placement, and I don't want to be dealing with limitations of Canva. And so one piece of advice I would give to you is, as you choose your tools, like, so let's kind of advance the ball a little bit. So you're like, okay, I hear you guys. I've asked the wrong question initially. So now I know the problems I want to solve, and I'm looking at 4 tools, and they all seem to solve that problem for me. Okay, so now let me give you another piece of advice. That piece of advice is watch how people use the tool on YouTube. In other words, go to YouTube and look up like something you'd want to do. Like, for example, how to create a mask layer in Figma, right? And if you don't know what a mask layer is, it's basically the thing you use to like put pictures in and have them be shaped certain ways and stuff like that, right? And so I go and I look, how hard is it to do in Canva? How hard is it to do in Figma? How hard is it to do in Illustrator? And I just see what people have to do. Does that level of work correspond to how I think about things, how I order things in my brain, and something that excites me and makes me want to do it? Or does that work seem too hard? Does it seem like I'd have to learn too many new things? Like there's a whole language there that I'd have to learn, as an obstacle to overcome. And if it's in the latter category, then don't use it. Like, it could be a perfectly great tool. It's just not a great tool for you, right?
Yeah. So one of the things that I would recommend people do is, if you're considering a tool, ask for a list of people in your business that use that tool. Like on social media, go post on social media or something. Well, no, if you're talking, like if you're engaging with the company, like if somebody approaches you and says, use our CRM, you can ask them, give me a list of people that are using your CRM. And now inevitably, and your knee jerk is going to be, well, they're only going to give you their best customers. Exactly. So that's actually the right answer, because now you want to know how that customer runs their business and talk to them. And if they run their business in a way that you run your business, if they have the same values and vision, because a lot of this also has to do with, do you have support staff? Do you have somebody to do this for you? Are you expected to do it yourself? Those are all of the deeper questions that you need to ask, because their best customer that uses it, and here's the thing that I run into, and one of the experiences we had with a CRM that we tried, the CRM looked like it was amazing, and we actually invested in it and spent a lot of money on it, and it never went live. And And at the end of the day, we were trying to modify something that call centers were using for a very small boutique experience with the consumer. So what they loved the tool for was for features that it had that we would never use.
Mhm.
Like we don't have 50 people that this lead needs to go to and round robin to and reassign to and all this kind of stuff. So if they're giving you testimonials, I suppose, or contacts of their best customers, and those customers are not running their business the way that you would run your business, that's a really good indication that that might not be the right tool for the job that you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
So and YouTube, I think, is fantastic. I'm just thinking in the mortgage space, I don't know how many people are producing videos on that kind of thing. So in that particular case, it would be like these Facebook groups. There's some very big industry centric Facebook groups where there's a lot of people in there and they all have really great input and great experiences. And, but it's not the tools, it's how they're using it. So find people that are trying to do the same thing you're trying to do, create the same experience, have the same outcome, have the same resources that you have, and then determine whether or not that tool is going to fit into there. There's just so many moving parts.
Let me push back on this a little bit. Okay.
Yep.
So I hear what you're saying about wanting to replicate the people who are doing what you want to do, but go ahead.
Well, it's not replicate. It's not replicate. It's just understanding where their experience feedback is coming from. They have a staff of 15 support people, and they custom built all this stuff out. What they use isn't what it is out of the box, that kind of thing.
Okay. So I'm going to put in front of you a hole I've fallen into and see if you can help others avoid the hole. So the hole
on top of it.
It's gonna be a pile on. So the hole I fall into is I want to do X, but I can't do X unless I have all the right stuff to do X. And all the right stuff costs me thousands of dollars. So real world example, I want a podcast. But before I podcast, I should really have a soundboard and a nice mic and a boom arm. So I'm going to go spend several $1,000s on that stuff. And then once I have that, and only once I have that, will I be ready to podcast? That's a mistake I've made so many times. I'm looking to replicate the sound of other podcasters I like, right? Like that's how this ties in. I look at a Joe Rogan, I look at a Hugh Hewitt, who I worked for years ago, and I say, all right, like that's the level I got. So how do people avoid that hole?
I don't know if you necessarily have to avoid it. I think sometimes that's part of the process. It depends on how vital the tech piece is that you're identifying. So what it sounded to me like what you just described is going back to what's a technology what's something that you could be excited about using. It's going to motivate you to use it, because every single tech tool that you use, there's going to be a learning curve, and it's never going to work the way that they promise out of the box.
Right.
You've got to be able to get through that, and you've got to be excited about logging into it and using it. And I was the same way when I started doing podcasts and live video many, many years ago. I bought all the stuff. I had the soundboards, I had the XLR mics, I had the mixing boards. I brought them into your office because I haven't used them for years, and we used it when we started using our podcast. Yeah. But it taught me valuable lessons about how to create a better process and how to create a better system. So I thought I was solving tools to put out something that was good enough. And what I ended up learning is almost all of it was overkill. But it was appropriate. Actually, I guess it was probably appropriate for the time. It was hard to get multiple people on one video or one podcast,
Yeah.
and so you needed mixing boards and things like that, and you could only get XLR mixing boards, and so you need XLR mics and all that kind of stuff.
Right. Yeah. So, okay. So now let me take a crack at answering my own question here for a second.
Because I didn't give you the answer you wanted me to give.
You did. You gave a really good answer, but there's a part of this question that I don't think is fair to you because you can't see my internal motivation. Okay. Yeah. And that was, I think there's a degree to which we use technology as an excuse for not doing something we're afraid of sucking at. Right. So this is going back to the Kyle Seagraves episode once more. He felt a little embarrassed walking around with his phone, but he did it anyway. Right. Whereas I would have been like, yeah, I'm not going to walk around with my phone, recording myself answering questions like an idiot. I'm going to wait to do the Kyle Seagraves things until I have the fancy Canon EOS R mirrorless that's going to plug in and make me look this sexy. I know. Calm down, girls. Calm down. Hello. I'm not going to do it until I have the expensive mic and the Rode system that I have here, right? But in reality, that's just me making an excuse and delaying taking a risk. So I feel like Scott's answer is a good answer, but also I think if you're in the position that I've been in so many times, you really have to interrogate, why are you actually delaying, right? Or are you using the fact that you know what a good response to this would be? Are you willing to be Joe Rogan 11 years ago? Go back and watch his
Gary V.
What's that?
Or Gary V.
Or Gary V.
You look at Gary V's first wine library video on YouTube, and it's horrendous.
Awful. It really is.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, frankly, our videos were better than most of those guys when we first started the marketing trench. I mean, because we actually had a sense of what we were doing. Joe Rogan and Gary Vee didn't, but they just embraced the technology. And, again, Kyle Seagraves said the same thing. If you're not willing to look like those guys in their first videos and you're like, I got to look like them now, probably you don't have a tech problem. If you're asking what's the right tech stack to use and you're not willing to be the real estate agent or the lender as they were 10 years ago. And it's a little bit harder to look at, see what their site was like, but you could use like Web Archiver or something to look up their website from when they got started. If you're not willing to look like that when you get started, you might not have a tech problem.
Yeah. And that was kind of where I wanted to go with that conversation in that particular group. Is if you keep looking, if you can't find the right technology, then I think you should probably take a step back and look closer at what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
And really just make sure that you have that mapped out, because I feel like sometimes we make decisions off of incomplete data because we get excited about the promise of what it says it'll deliver.
Yeah. Right.
So yeah, no, okay. I wasn't sure where this conversation was going to go, if it was going to be, too boring, but I think we unpacked this in a lot. I think we unpacked this really well. I think it's an important conversation because we're all technology enhanced, yes. Right? As human beings, every single one of us, from our cell phone to our smartwatch to our biometric monitors that we wear on our hands and things like that. Well, and that was actually an experience that I had. I was using a different biometric measurer that measures your sleep and your calories burned and all of that. And I was using the one that Joe Rogan uses, the Whoop band, right?
Yeah.
And I used it and I liked it, but I don't wear things on my wrist. So I wasn't used to wearing something on my wrist all the time. And the data that it produced was geared towards high level athletes that like
which
it's,
you are.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I move this mic at least once a day. And 16-ounce curls whenever I get a chance.
To be clear, I'm fully aware that I am in a glass house throwing big stones right now.
We all are.
Yeah.
And this is exactly the thing. So I liked it, but I realized I was only looking at my sleep, and I was only looking at how many calories I was burning. And then I was introduced to a new biometric thing. And again, I didn't want to use a watch because I don't wear things on my wrist. And so this is a thing called the Oura Ring. And
have we talked about this?
And the reason I bought it was because I saw the app and I saw the way that it gave me the data. And it gave it to me so that an idiot like me can glance at it and say, I did good today. but it gave it to me in a great format, and I really enjoyed it and I appreciated it. So that was another one of those things. It's like I wanted to measure these things. I used a certain tech. I recognized that I didn't use the tech to its fullest ability. It was overkill for what I was looking for. And so I switched to continue to solve the same problem, but with a little bit different technology that was geared more towards how I use it.
Yeah, no, that's really, really great. I mean, I had an Apple Watch for a long time, and I eventually the battery expanded and it broke, and Apple wouldn't do anything about it. So I never replaced it, and I never bought another watch like it because I don't wear watches. I don't really like watches, right? Yeah, I mean, that's just, sometimes you have to, sometimes you look at it, Scott, to your point about, I liked how the data was presented. I mean, that's awesome. And that, that goes back to an earlier point in our conversation about finding the thing that makes sense to you, right? But then, is that Ricardo? Is he finally calling in?
No, but it doesn't surprise me. I got some texts. Those are probably Ricardo. I swear he waits until I'm live streaming to ever contact me. He's never called me when I wasn't online live.
Well, you're online live all the time. Thanks. Because I don't know if people know this about Scott, but he actually is a Twitch streamer, and he streams 10 hours a day.
I have a Twitch. Is that the same thing? Does that count?
But yeah, so I mean, I've looked at this Oura Ring before because I will wear rings. And so you have to look and just be like, sometimes you have to be like, well, the sexier product doesn't align with who I am as a person, right? That's fine. No harm, no foul in that. Yeah, I really think I keep coming back to these categories of, does it reduce friction and or amplify effort? Like, I just feel like those are the operative categories, or maybe the operative filters for should I have this thing? Should I use this thing? Is this worth my investment? I keep coming back to those. And I feel like here with the tech stack question, that comes into play. Yeah.
All right. Success. I think we beat this horse to death.
Yeah, no, it was really good. I actually, this was helpful for me, and really appreciate your insights on this. If you want to check out more great conversations about people, the technology they're using, how they are, motivating themselves to be successful in business, you can go to ricardobueno.com and check out his amazing podcast and his great content. He's always producing content, except here when he decides not to show up because he has meetings.
Sure.
He's like, my final boss wanted to meet during the podcast. I'm like, you're drinking an old fashioned, and we all know it.
Exactly.
Anyway, our co-host, when he decides to show up, is Ricardo, and he's awesome. You should go check out his stuff, ricardobueno.com. Scott Shane can be found over at findmywayhome.com. And later this year, we look forward to having a great conversation with him about the really cool stuff he's working on. And then, of course, you can find me and my team if you're in Southern California looking to buy or sell a house, want to know what your closing costs might be. If you're the seller, you want to know how much money you're going to walk away with. LighthouseEscrow.com is our company, and you can scroll down a couple scrolls. You're going to see a closing cost calculator. It's just an estimator, but it will help you wrap your head around the opportunity before you if you're thinking about buying or selling and what the costs associated with that might be. So LighthouseEscrow.com. And, of course, if you want to go check out the episode with Kyle Seagraves or any of our previous episodes where we talk about some of our favorite tools, because we're not against recommending tools. We recommend tools all the time. Yeah. You can go to marketingtrench.fm, find our past episodes there, or find us on YouTube. We're the Marketing Trench. Look us up on YouTube at Marketing Trench. You're going to see us. We're the top hit. We have 74 subscribers as of today, and we would love to have 100 subscribers. We would love to have you guys subscribe so we can get that really cool vanity URL and not have the ridiculously long URL that we have right now. But we have to have 100 subscribers in order to do that. So if you're not yet a subscriber, please go to YouTube, find us there, and subscribe. That's it for us. We're all done. Until next time, this has been the Marketing Trench.